I've noticed a common pattern in ADHD women, especially those of us over 40, that negatively impacts our businesses. It's limited or a complete lack of curiosity. I know this pattern well and have had to work to take back my curiosity to help my business. In this episode, we will break down how many of us lost our curiosity, the problems it creates in our business, and at the end, I'll share my strategy for taking it back. If you too have lost your curiosity, your ability to question, you'll hopefully walk away feeling validated and supported, and you'll have a way to reignite your curiosity to help your business and your life. Be sure to listen. Welcome to the Self Loved ADHD Woman's Way podcast. I'm your host, Jen Barnes. If you're an ADHD woman entrepreneur, ADHD adjacent, or ADHD ish, you've come to the right place. We'll dive deep into the unique challenges you face, from the inner turmoil to the outer obstacles. We'll blend neuroscience, IFS, and somatic healing and explore practical strategies to help you navigate the world of entrepreneurship with ADHD with greater ease and effectiveness. I'm glad you're here. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so excited to talk about this really important topic that I didn't really see was happening until maybe within the last year, I'd say. And it's been that I'm slowly taking back my curiosity. And I've noticed that I'm not the only one that needs to do this. Sure, some people already are born questioners. And so if that's you, you might be like, Jen, this episode isn't for me. Totally get it. Probably not. There are a lot of us, especially over a certain age because of how society was when we were growing up, who lost our curiosity. And there's lots of reasons why this happens. The Industrial Revolution created an education system, which is still our current education system, that was meant to douse curiosity. It was meant to create obedient factory workers. So they didn't want people to question. And sure, when I was a school social worker, I was aware that in one of the districts I was in, at least, there was an active effort to ask kids to be more curious, to have more curious learning. But that certainly wasn't done when I was growing up, and not for a lot of my peers either. I remember looking somewhat in awe, but also kind of annoyed at the questioners throughout high school and college because I was like, you're breaking the rules. Like the rule follower in me, that part of me was mad because they were breaking the rules. But then also, it seemed to be what the professor and some of those teachers wanted, but I didn't know how to do it. And so, how does this happen? In our school system growing up, I don't know about you, but we weren't really encouraged to question anything. And especially, I went to Catholic school, so we were definitely not allowed to question anything related to religion or God or Jesus or anything like that. We just had to follow exactly what they said, even all the way through confirmation. There was no room for questioning. It wasn't even something I considered an option. So I wouldn't have thought to answer a question. And that is how it became a problem. Because somewhere in there, I learned, and I suspect maybe you learned this too, whether you went to a religious school or not, that questioning wasn't even an option, especially for girls and especially for ADHDers who are just trying to get by. A lot of us masked in a lot of different ways and tried to fly under the radar as much as possible. So asking questions on top of it, our ADHD probably would have gotten us in a lot of trouble. And so I didn't even see questioning as an option. I sure as heck didn't see questioning my parents as an option. And they got nothing bad. They're loving people. And it just wasn't something that was encouraged in children in the Gen X generation for sure. The boomer generation, definitely not, since they're the ones who raised us. But also, I work with boomers and I'm aware of that. And even some of my millennial clients, I noticed, some of the older millennials, I noticed, just questioning was not really an option. And that still happens. I still have some Gen Z clients who have Gen X parents who maybe didn't do their work. And so they stifle any and all questions and curiosity in their kids. But I don't know that I even noticed how much of a problem it was until I noticed my niece questioning things. I noticed my brother-in-law inviting her to question things, both of them. And it was shocking to me because that was never an option when we were growing up. And I gotta believe I'm not alone here. And then I got into high school. I don't know if this is your story too, but I got into high school and I think I liked math because math had certainty and there were no questions. And so there were rules. And so I could follow the rules like I was taught and do well in it because I happened to be good at math and practiced a lot because I liked it. But the other classes, I was in a class called Spectrum that combined, let's see, religion, English, and social studies. So again, I went to a Catholic school, so that may not have been thing. It was a really cool idea for a class, and I struggled. I got an A, I did well enough. But where I struggled is they wanted us to ask these really big, important questions. And I had no history, no reference point for that. And at the time, even now, I'm still like, I had no idea how to even do that. I'm just realizing now, like, how hard that was and kind of what a ridiculous expectation it was, given that I hadn't been allowed to question that whole time. And I don't know if other people seem to do it okay. I definitely had been masking a lot by then for my ADHD, so maybe it was harder for me. I'm not sure. But what I notice now is since actually starting to practice yoga in my 30s and then in my later 30s, I started to notice some ability to be curious and start to ask more and more questions. When I was younger, I would ask questions more to understand, not because I was curious about alternative answers. I wanted the teacher to tell me the answer because that's what I was taught. And it wasn't until I started practicing yoga in my late 30s that I even began to have questions over and above questions for clarity, like curious questions. And this is a real problem in business. And I don't know if this is you. I can tell you this was my experience that I was looking for answers outside. When I took my first online course in early 2020, I wanted her to tell me what to do. The problem is what she did worked for her, but it was an outdated strategy. So I did everything she said and none of it worked. I spent probably 20 grand on her courses trying to get the right thing and it didn't work, right? And that can be a problem because then we're looking for the answer outside. So number one, it makes it easy for people to, I don't want to say prey on us. I'm not saying she preyed on me. I certainly was looking for what she was selling, but it makes it easy for people to prey on us because we're maybe not asking the questions because maybe we don't know that we even can or even know how or know what the questions are. And so that's one way it can show up is we end up signing up for a million things so someone will give us the answer. And I'm in no way saying we shouldn't take courses or do things to improve our healing and growth and our education. It's just that when we are in those settings, it's important that we are taking time to see what actually resonates with us on a deep level, not just asking questions for clarity, but really sitting with things. That's what good coaching is. Good coaching has you think about the deeper questions, not just someone giving the answer. I'm going to tell you it's tough though, because people want the answer. That's consulting. A lot of people want you to tell them what to do. But here's the problem. If I were to tell you what to do, or you were to tell your clients what to do, a few things happen. One, we don't know, I don't know your audience, so I don't know how they're going to respond to things. I don't know your energy. I don't know what you want in your business. So it's very hard for me to tell you exactly what you need to do to the little second. to every little detail to know how to grow your business. I can tell you what you need to do to help your ADHD, and I can give you some business strategy. But what it comes down to is you sitting with yourself and figuring out how to do it your own way. That's what's not taught. It's one of my favorite things to help teach because in a lot of places, people, I hear it, whether it's people I work with in therapy or coaching or whatever, but also less and less in coaching, but I see it a lot in the mentorship program I'm in where people will ask the coaches a question like they want them to fix it. And I love the coaches because they're like asking questions back. And that's what we need is to be able to ask ourselves the questions so that we can come up with our own answers that work for us. Another reason, oh, you know what? Let me back up. ADHD moment. I forgot to say how telling you what to do is also a bad idea. There's two other pieces to it. One is that if I tell you what to do and it goes well, who gets the credit? Me, right? It's like, ooh, that Jen is awesome. Don't get me wrong. I like myself. I think I can be awesome in many moments, but I want you to think you're awesome because you did the thing. And that is what's going to help you grow your business long term and not become dependent on a coach. But also, if someone like me tells you what to do and it doesn't go well, who gets the blame? Also, me or the coach, right? And the reason that's a problem for you is if you do something and it doesn't go well and you don't sit and look at what happened and unpack it and get curious about how things worked and where the mistakes were, what interrupted the flow, what wasn't working, then you're going to keep having the same problem. Because the only way we can solve problems in business is with curiosity, is to lean in and be curious and not feel shame about things when they don't go as intended. My other word for mistakes, right? Or sentence for mistakes. But we need to be able to question, how did that go? What went well? What did not go well? What might that have been about? And that's not just a question for clarity. That's a question to sit in the silence around, a question to reflect on, a question to be with. We'll get a little bit more into what to do about it. But that's the other piece of if someone tells you what to do and it doesn't go well, then you don't get any of the learning that comes from that experience. I also want to say that when we don't have curiosity, I've kind of already said a little bit about this, but when we lose our curiosity, it makes it really hard to problem solve mistakes or when things don't go as intended. Because, like I was saying, when you have a launch or a social media post, let's make it smaller. When you have a social media post that has crickets and you're like, wow, I've had posts, like it's not the first like post that's you've put up or you've had posts that people have liked or commented on, and all of a sudden, no one likes this one. Well, that's curious. And to be able to problem solve what that's about, what was it that was so different that didn't resonate with people? And sometimes we can lean in and get curious. In fact, I recommend we lean in and get curious and say, what was that about? But we can't do that if we've lost our curiosity. We can't do that if we don't know how to question or even know what questions to ask, because some questions are more powerful than others. It tends to be those what, how, and when type of questions, not the why questions, not the why did this happen to me? Why does no one like my stuff? Not like that, but what went on in that situation that no one connected with you. It also, in a lot of ways, when we lose our curiosity, we also lose our creativity. A lot of creativity comes from curious, like curious ideas. A lot of times when I have something I want to talk about on the podcast, that comes from curiosity. That comes from quiet reflection. That comes from, you're going to think this is silly, but this comes from me asking the universe before I go to bed, what do my podcast listeners need to hear when I record my podcast tomorrow, and then listening to the answer, but asking the right question. And then that helps with the curiosity or with the creativity of what you're going to do. So when we don't have that, business can be very, very hard. It also can be hard trying to figure out what to do, not just correcting mistakes, but if we don't have curiosity and you have a bunch of ideas about what you want to do, but you're not able to ask curious questions, it's going to be very hard to ascertain what the next best step is for you and your business. Because hopefully you're like me and you're flooded with amazing intuitive ideas for your business. If you're not, let's chat. We'll find a there's a way to increase that. But when we're in the flow and we have these ideas, we have to be able to ask questions. We have to be curious about where we want to go. And some of that is sitting in the silence and hearing the answers from deep within. Some of it is thinking through logistics for sure. Maybe not thinking through, but questioning different pieces of how it would look. Again, without curiosity, without the ability to question, we're going to have a really hard time. So I want to spend the rest of this time talking about what to do if this is you. How do we take back our curiosity? And you heard me mention before that I didn't start to notice my curiosity come back. I didn't even know that I lost it. I just thought I never had it. But all kids are curious. We all ask why a lot when we're like, what, 2, 3, 4, right? By the time we're in first grade, we know everything, I think, is I remember when my nieces were first graders, they knew everything. It was awesome to watch. Anyway, but until then, we ask a lot of questions because we're curious. And that's how we know it's something that was lost. So I didn't even realize it was lost. I just noticed I started to be more curious. I don't think that I noticed it at the time. I'm noticing it more looking back. But I started to be more curious after several years of yoga practice. When I was already teaching yoga and I was in a Anusara immersion for yoga teachers. And we had to sit with different texts of yoga, like the Bhagavad Gita, and reflect and ask questions. And I was still asking a lot of questions for clarity, but I was starting to see glimmers of curiosity in myself. And it felt weird because it was so foreign to me. I was like 38 years old or something like that. So this was not that long ago. And that was exciting, but it was the yoga that helped. And then more and more, I've been meditating since I was 25, sometimes more consistently than others, and really consistently for about the past 15 years. But as I've meditated longer, that has created some curiosity as well. But it wasn't until I started to be in coaching programs. Not that first online course, that wasn't really coaching. That was more an educational program. But when I started to be in coaching programs and I was asked really good questions, and I am not someone who likes to give the answer, I don't know. It's just not in my nature. I will find out or figure it out is how how I roll. And the questions that were asked were not find out or figure it out questions. Before that, I had been writing more. I started doing a daily writing practice. I don't know. I don't know what year. It doesn't really matter. You probably don't care. But I started doing a daily writing practice, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago when I read The Artist's Way by Julie Cameron, maybe less than 10 years ago, but I would write daily. And at first, a lot of that was just writing what my feelings were and what was coming up. As I did my IFS level 1 training and then later level 2, a lot more of that writing was connecting with the different parts of me and getting curious. So alongside of that was these coaches asking me these questions. And I wouldn't say I don't know. My response would be, I need to reflect on that. And then I did. And so if you are wanting to get your curiosity back, number one, I would encourage you to think about if the phrase "I don't know" serves you. Personally, I don't think it does. I think it's kind of a cop out, but more effective way to say it, if you do want to know and don't know, is to say, I need to reflect on that more. I'm not sure yet. And if you don't know yet, but you don't really care to reflect on it, you can say, I'm not sure. And it's not something I really care to figure out because that's honest. That's standing in your personal power to recognize like, oh, okay, this is where I'm at with this question or this problem. So that's one thing I would encourage. But then when something does come up, and whether it's a question someone asks you, whether it's a question I ask you if you work with me one to one or in my program, I would encourage you to reflect. And sometimes we know right away. Sometimes if someone asks a question, we know right away, but sometimes we need to reflect. And what do I mean by that? What does that look like? Well, it's going to look different for everyone. I will say this. I find that being in silence is the best reflection tool I've found, and then writing after it. And I can already hear some of you saying, but Jen, I can't be in silence. My thoughts are so busy. That's okay. To me, I'm like, well, then sit in silence longer because eventually they kind of quiet down a little bit. But sometimes in all that thinking, the answer comes. And the answer that you seek is going to sound different than the initial knee jerk responses. It just has a higher vibration to it. You can tell that it's coming from your highest self or from your intuition or spirit or whatever you believe because it's just a higher quality response. It seems to align and you can almost feel it in your body. So if you're thinking, how do I sit in silence? I would encourage you to set a timer, try 5 minutes to start, have a blank notebook or journal nearby. I don't know about you, but I love to buy journals. Right now, I'm focusing on purchasing only necessities, so I'm on a little hiatus from getting to purchase journals. So it's not a financial priority right now for me. So, but I love purchasing journals. So if you love purchasing journals, what an opportunity. Now you get to go buy a reflection journal. But sit in the silence. Set a timer for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then afterwards free write. And I recommend when you sit in that silence, ask yourself a question. Ask yourself a question. Sometimes my question is if I don't get anything after going to bed at night, what I want to talk about on the podcast, sometimes I'll say, what do my podcast listeners need to hear? Sometimes the question is, what product or service do I need to offer next? Or what launch strategy would work best for me right now with my audience? But asking really good questions and then sitting with it, sitting in the silence, and then letting yourself free write. And eventually the answer boils up, bubbles up, boils up, bubbles up. And maybe there's many answers, but you'll notice as you pause to reflect, it'll be there. But all of that comes from curiosity. Now, if you're like, I don't even know what question I would ask, great. Here's how you know that. Here's how we really get the curiosity going. Notice things that are not working. Notice things that are not working well. Notice patterns around things not working. For me, this maybe for about a year and a half, I was very, very clear on noticing some financial decisions I was making for my business and personally that were not great. And I was noticing the pattern. I was starting to notice the pattern. I was starting to notice what was happening. And then I took a little course to help me and it only kind of helped. But then this year I did a somatic money healing and that was phenomenal. The woman's name is Kyra. I cannot remember anything else about it, but at any rate, that was really helpful. But also, what I did to even know I needed that is I sat there and noticed I have this pattern of spending money in this certain way that's not productive for me. And what is going on that I'm doing that? What need am I trying to make? What do I get out of doing that behavior? Like what gain is there? How might this protect me in some way? What parts of me are concerned would have like what are parts of me concerned what happened if I stopped doing this? And I just asked a bunch of questions about that pattern. And when you start to do that, again, especially if after you ask the questions, you sit in the silence and do some writing, you not only spark your curiosity, but you start to get the answers that you need, the answers that you seek. So the quote unquote strategy or solution is simple. It's notice the things that aren't working for you, notice the patterns, ask the questions, sit in the silence if you can, and free write if you can. It's simple, but it may not be easy. It may take some practice, especially if you're not used to answering questions, especially if you have parts of you who are terrified to ask questions because of what happened to you when you were a child if you ask questions. So if that's you, you may need to do some deeper work first, possibly with a therapist if if that in that situation there may be some real trauma there to be able to ask these questions. So there it is. You have my strategy. It's simple, hopefully easy, but sometimes not going to be easy. And that's the thing. People want quick fixes and easy solutions. But with big change, while the solutions may be simple, they don't have to be hard. They take work. They take effort. They take stepping into your power and doing something about it instead of being a victim of whatever happened to you when you're growing up or not knowing or whatever it is. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And out of this, I've been having weekly webinars and it's been fun. So I'm going to keep doing weekly webinars. So I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to check it out. It's on how to overcome invisible ADHD obstacles so you can build and grow a prosperous, meaningful business you love. And some of the things that might come up as you're looking at these patterns are some of those invisible obstacles, the parts who hold things like fear and doubt and shame and other stuff. Those are things I see getting in the way of women trying to build and grow their business. And so this is a free workshop. It's usually ends up being about an hour and a half. I would like to say I could get it done in an hour. I think if you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, I'm a talker. So like it just usually takes about an hour and a half. But if you've been listening for a while, you also know that I bring the value. So I would love if you sign up for that. I'm going to have some more in January. I just haven't scheduled them yet. So stay tuned and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.